So, one of the objections to greenhouse gas removal efforts have been that, oh, isn't this going to give a free pass to the oil companies and the fossil fuel companies because they're saying, oh, well, we can emit all these greenhouse gases today and take it out of the atmosphere tomorrow. And my sense is that, well, this is a theoretical possibility that I don't think human psychology typically works that way, that if people are saying, well, look, we're so concerned about these elevated greenhouse gas concentrations that we really think we need to work on ways to get this stuff out of the atmosphere as rapidly as we can, that also builds up pressure to simultaneously reduce emissions. And so I do see these efforts to develop greenhouse gas removal technologies as working in consort with efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I did my PhD dissertation on the long-term geologic carbon cycle and what happened when a major disruption to the Earth system happened, when some kind of meteorite hit the Earth and killed off the dinosaurs and also killed off marine species. And we saw that it took hundreds of thousands of years for the climate system to recover from that. And we know that the processes that govern the recovery was the weathering of silicate rocks, so that the CO2 reacts with silicate rocks and then goes down rivers, and then eventually marine organisms make calcium carbonate. And so I've long been a big fan of accelerating the natural cycles of getting increased weathering of silicate rocks and increased carbonate formation. Now, whether this is technically and economically a sensible thing to do, I don't know, but in terms of the understanding of Earth's geochemical cycles, it definitely makes sense. The other thing is that the Earth system's far more complicated than any of our models, even though our models are fairly complicated. And so if we want to reduce risk to the planet, we need to reduce our interference in planetary processes. And I think the idea that humans are going to manage the planet well and take the controls of the planet and operate it thoughtfully, there's not a good history of humans taking care of the land and oceans in a thoughtful way in the past, and I wouldn't necessarily expect that to change in the future. And so, anything I think that reduces human interference in natural processes is probably better for the long-term well-being of humans. And I think that means, if we could bring down populations, densify what we're doing to let more land go to nature and so on, it would all be for the good. Yeah, the more lightly that humans could tread on this planet, the smaller our footprint on the planet, the better off we're going to be. I think that natural systems, the natural cycles have sustained life on this planet, sustained the evolution of human beings, and the more we can be in the kind of environment that was representative of our evolutionary past, the better off we're going to be. I think one of the big challenges is right today, we evolved essentially as hunter-gatherers in where our big concerns were, do we have enough food saved up to get us through the winter? And we're long spatial distances, whereas worrying about whether the village in the next valley is going to come over and attack us. And so now we've gone from having to concern ourselves with with living through the winter or the people in the next valley. We have to concern ourselves with emitting gases that last for hundreds of thousands of years in the atmosphere and affect global scale processes. And our brains and our emotional systems just aren't adapted to this. I mean, I know that for me, if a cat meows in my presence, I respond emotionally to that more strongly than hearing about people starving to death on the other side of the world, because our emotional structures are designed to respond to what's in our sensory experience. And so we're we've created a world that we're no longer adapted to, and we don't have the emotional structures to respond to those threats in a visceral way. And so we have to use our cerebral cortex and approach these problems analytically. And the problem is that until we can try to do our analysis and think of what's the best thing to do, but we have a political system and social systems that depend on these sort of emotional and visceral responses to threats. I mean, today, if you just, there's around 10,000 Americans prematurely dying each year just due to aerosols blowing over the Pacific Ocean from Chinese power plants. Now, if China was, I'm not being anti-Chinese here, but if China were to like physically attack the Americans and be killing 10,000 Americans a year with their bare hands or something, we would emotionally respond viscerally to that, and who knows what we would do. But because it's this diffuse health thing, and we see with coronavirus, there's a jumbo jet full of people dying every day due to coronavirus right now in the United States. And if it was a jumbo jet crash every day, we'd say, oh, we have to do something to stop these planes from crashing. But because we respond emotionally and viscerally to a jet crash, but not to this diffuse kind of health hazards. And so we have brains that are not designed to respond emotionally in rational ways, to respond emotionally to cause us to respond appropriately to the threats that are facing us today. And so really we need our cerebral cortexes to dominate our emotional responses and be analytic about what we do. But we seem to be in a political system that's whipping up fears and hysterias and so on. And so how to overcome this and get a more rational response to the problems facing us today is really tough. Sorry for that diatribe there.